Welcome, and greetings to all. I am Shenlong Pendragon, the Lore Master. So as usual, my disclaimer, I don't own any of the images or the story in this video. The credit for these all belong to their original sources. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And thank you for joining me for this Christmas special. So ladies and gentlemen, as you can tell, I'm going to be doing the story of the Big Man in Red. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I will be doing the story of Santa Claus. So I guess the real question to start off with was, who is the Big Man in Red? Who exactly was this beloved, fat, jolly old man that is beloved by millions worldwide? Well, most of us know the story of St. Nicholas being a Turkish saint that converted to Christianity at some point in his life and then travelled to Europe. One such story claims that he travelled to Germany and set up a toy store. And once every year, around the 25th of December, to honour, for the first thing, Jesus Christ's supposed birthday, he would open the doors of his shop and give each child one toy, which he'd made at some point during the year. And because of this generous donation to the children, he was venerated as a saint. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is only one such story, and it is a modern adaptation of the true story. So what I will be telling you today is St. Nicholas's true origin story, as well as other noteworthy characters which have been associated with Santa Claus. I do hope you find it interesting, and without further ado, let us continue. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is St. Nicholas. He was a 4th century Greek bishop. In fact, he was the Bishop of Myra, which is now known as Demir. This particular city can be found in Lycia, and that was a province within the Byzantium Empire. The province itself can be found in modern-day Turkey, which is why St. Nicholas was originally thought to be Turkish, but as the region was under control of the Byzantium Empire, he was in fact Greek. I can go into stories of the Byzantium Empire much later on, but in case anyone is wondering, it's basically the remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire after the Roman Empire split into two different factions. St. Nicholas himself was very well known to, the people of the city because he gave very generous donations of gifts and money to the poor families, which is why he was venerated as a saint. Probably one of the most famous cases was where he gave 3 impoverished families who were very pious to the Christian faith enough money to put together dowries for their daughters. If you're unsure of what a dowry actually is, it's basically a token gift presented to the husband's family from the wife's family on the day of the wedding. It is an old custom which I'm pleased to say has died out, and the idea of a dowry was that it would show the woman's worth. It could also be the origin of the slightly joke tradition where the father of the bride supposedly pays for everything at the wedding. I can't actually confirm or disprove this because it is just pure speculation. Anyway, by putting together the money for the dowry, St. Nicholas was actually able to save these women from becoming prostitutes because they were actually able to find husbands in the end, which is beneficial for a number of reasons. So after his numerous good deeds, St. Nicholas, of course, as all men do, eventually died, and he was buried in Italy. In 1087, several Italian sailors found his tomb and moved approximately half the skeleton and several relics to the city of Bari. In fact, these relics and skeletons still remain here, and they are stored within a basilica. This particular basilica is actually still a pilgrim site even today, and it is still possible to go and visit the remains of St. Nicholas. During the First Crusade, however, the tomb was once again discovered by a group of Venetian sailors, and they decided to take some trophies back too. So they moved several of the remains to the city of Venice. In Venice, these particular remains are stored within a church which has been since dedicated to St. Nicholas, and the church itself is actually built on the San Nicolo al Lido. Due to the connection with these sailors, St. Nicholas was posthumously named the patron saint of sailors themselves. However, he has also been named as the patron saint of archers, children, pawnbrokers, and the two cities of Amsterdam and Moscow. So the custom of giving gifts and how that relates to him is, well, the idea was that his generous donations were continued after his death, and eventually it became a custom to give children presents on the evening of the 5th of December, and then they would open them up on the morning of the 6th to honour St. Nicholas's name day. During reformations in the church, which was primarily opposed to the veneration of several saints, the celebrations on the 6th of December were almost entirely cancelled, and the custom of giving gifts was moved to the 24th and 25th of December instead, to align with Christmas Day. So the actual name Santa Claus and where it comes from, well, it is actually an official name for St. Nicholas. It was given to him many years later, posthumously. So, in case anyone is going around saying there's no such thing as Santa Claus, well, there is actually historical proof and evidence for Santa Claus being real, and, well, you've just heard the story there. So before we move on to the next character, there is one other thing I'd like to talk about, and this focuses on the Belgian and Dutch point of view. Here he gets referred to as Sinterklaas and Kisterman. These two names almost literally mean the Christmas man. However, in French, it's also known as Père Noël. One thing which I find particularly interesting is that 36% estimated within the Netherlands are said to still give gifts on Sinterklaas Day, which is the 6th of December. Many of these people also do give gifts on the 25th as well. Within Belgium, Sinterklaas Day presents are customarily only for children. However, when gifts are given on the 25th, these are gifts which are to be presented for all ages and not just children. According to the old stories, St. Nicholas actually did have helpers to pass out presents to children. However, they weren't actually elves as they are in the modern story. So these characters are referred to as Zwart Pieten in Dutch and Piers Futard in French. Please do forgive the pronunciations. Dutch and French are not my strong languages, I'm afraid. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the true origin story of St. Nicholas himself. I do hope you found that interesting. However, it's not the only origin story for Santa Claus. There are several other characters I would like to speak about, so without further ado, let's move on to them. So, let's move on and look at a different character for Christmas. Now, the image that you're seeing here is of an English gentleman, the real name of which is been lost. No one truly knows what his actual real name is. However, he is Father Christmas. This is the character who is actually referred to as Father Christmas. And his origin story begins in the 16th century during the reign of King Henry VIII. He's always depicted as a large man, normally wearing green with a long white beard. Sometimes he's shown as being in grey, and quite often his cloak or robes have fur lining on them to help keep him warm. Much later, these grey and green robes were then actually later changed to the much more modern custom of red. So Father Christmas himself was believed by the Victorians to be a symbol of good cheer, good faith, and wishing people peace. And that's primarily why during Christmas time, where the supposed peace on earth idea comes from. It's from the English adaptation of this man right here. Rather than giving gifts to children and to the poor people, His main focus was to bring food and wine and have a great feast in honor of, Jesus Christ, to be honest, and just celebrate Christmas. He believed because of this that Christmas time should be a great joy for everyone and it should be celebrated, and thus the feast became very important. And this is also why Christmas dinner for the British and also for the Americans is something of incredible importance. It's seen as the most important meal of the year for us. So the reason why primarily why it married up with Christmas, so the 25th, is although the celebrations were originally on the 6th, at the time where Father Christmas started trying to spread the message and bring good cheer to the people of England, England itself had actually stopped celebrating St. Nicholas Day on the 6th. They were still giving presents on the 25th, but there was no longer a St. Nicholas Day. So to marry everything up, they decided to have this great feast on Christmas Day rather than on the 6th. Quite often for Father Christmas, his physical appearance in the stories change, but what is nearly always kept is the robes. And in fact, Father Christmas was actually believed to be the inspiration for the Charles Dickens story, A Christmas Carol. He is in fact meant to be the ghost of Christmas present. So again, just something I found interesting, and hopefully you did too. Now, here's something that might surprise you. As most of you can probably guess, this is a picture of Odin on his horse Sleipnir, and in his hand he's holding his famous javelin, Gungnir, and beside him are of course his two hunting dogs. So a lot of you will be probably thinking, well, what on earth is Odin, who is in fact a war god and king of the Norse gods, got to do with Christmas? Well, prior to Christianity, so in pagan Europe, so the Germanic peoples, so people from Germany, Scandinavia, and even pre-Christian England when it was under Saxon rule, celebrated a holiday known as Yule, or Yuletide. And as many of you know, this is another term actually used for Christmas in modern day. So what Yule actually celebrates is the coming of the winter solstice. And eventually, when Christianity came into play, rather than just stopping this tradition altogether, it just became absorbed into Christmas itself. Which is hence why you see a lot of things like Yule logs, for example. It's originally a Norse tradition. So one thing that's interesting about the Odin character and how it relates to the modern day Santa Claus is that it's said that ghost or spirit activity during the Yuletime festivals was said to increase exponentially, and hence gave rise to something called the Wild Hunt. Now, if any of you are gamers, you will recognise the name The Wild Hunt from the Witcher 3 games. The Wild Hunt is actually a ghostly hunt or a ghostly procession that was said to move through the sky on horseback, and the leader of this hunt was thought to be Odin. Now, obviously, any of you who have played The Witcher 3 will think, well, the Wild Hunt in the game were seen as elves, big, powerful, evil, wanting to hunt down pretty much anything, including humans, as slaves. Well, the Wild Hunt's role during Yule was actually very different. They were hunting evil spirits to keep away from the halls of Asgard and primarily away from Valhalla. And in doing so, because they were protecting Asgard and Valhalla, they also, by extension, were protecting Midgard, or Earth. So, during their hunts, Odin was said to have delivered presents, or brought gifts, to the families under his rule. And this is actually where one of the stories of Santa Claus and the chimney comes from. It's believed that Odin would travel down the chimneys of people's homes to deliver their gifts. And the whole thing about Santa going through the sky, well, that's primarily because Odin rode through the sky on Sleipnir. During the Yuletime festival, Odin is primarily shown wearing a blue cloak. So yeah, sorry, let me repeat that, a blue hooded cloak. And traditionally he rides at night, hence why you're able to see the supposed ghostly apparitions in the original story. So, as hinted at earlier, gifts were also a big tradition for the Yuletime festival among the Germanic and Scandinavian peoples. And actually, believe it or not, in Finland they have a tradition which they call the Christmas goat. This was an adaptation of the Yule goat, where goat was the traditional meal served at Yuletime feast. And this goat, also known as the joulupukki, is actually still used in some places in Finland. So again, I hope you found that particular origin story interesting. Let's move on a wee bit. So here we see the more modern adaptation of Santa, a jolly old man with a long white beard, red sort of cloak or robes with white fur, black boots, white gloves, dropping off presents under the Christmas tree with a roaring fire behind him. This more sort of traditional look, as we see it for the modern, or the classic Santa look as it's sometimes known, primarily originates in the States, so the USA, and it was actually here where we see the origin of the reindeer. So I'll come back to the reindeer in just a few moments. Here we see another depiction of Santa looking very happy in his traditional red outfit and hat, dropping off Christmas presents for children. In this picture we can see that Santa is shown as a fairly plump man. This is primarily an American adaptation and an American tradition. The reason why they show Santa as being a plump man is because it's very, very much the tradition in America that children leave milk and cookies out for Santa and carrots for the reindeer. These are meant to be thank you gifts for Santa and his reindeer for bringing them presents. And I do have to say, hats off to the Americans. I think it's a really nice touch on the Christmas celebrations. When I was a boy, I always loved leaving milk and cookies out for Santa, and a few carrots for the reindeer. Yeah, so from America, this tradition of milk and cookies eventually spread to the rest of Europe through the UK, and from Europe it eventually spread to the rest of the Christian world. So over on the right hand side we can see a very nicely decorated Christmas tree. This is an adaptation of the pagan festival of Senyeia, where the pagan household or the family would feel sorry for tree spirits which have been left out in the cold during the winter time. So during the Senyeia festival they would cut down the trees and bring them into their household to offer warmth and shelter to the spirit. In turn, they hoped that the tree spirits would become a guardian of the family. When winter ended and Senyeia finished, the trees were taken outside of the house and left in the forest, so that the spirits could find new trees to inhabit. After Yule and Senyeia eventually became absorbed into Christmas, the recently converted pagans kept that tradition with the tree, and eventually it gave rise to the modern day Christmas tree as we see it. And of course that after became a thing within Europe, it spread throughout the rest of the Christian world, and we see, well, the Christmas tree as a big part of Christmas, and let's be honest, without a Christmas tree it really just isn't the same. So as promised, now let's actually talk about Santa's reindeer for a few moments. So this was changed from originally a horse to a single reindeer in 1821. This particular reindeer, it wasn't given any particular special name. However, 2 years later, in 1823, a poem was written by Clement C. Moore, and it was titled A Visit from St. Nicholas. and this was later renamed into the more well-known story as It Was the Night Before Christmas. And in this poem, Moore gives rise to 8 reindeer and names each of them. So in order of when they're listed, or rather in order of how their names go in the poem, the 8 reindeer are Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Dunder, and Blitzen, also known as Blitzen. Most of us know this particular poem, or at least a good part of it, so there's no real need for me to recite it. If any of you haven't heard this poem, it's quite a famous one, and it's often told on Christmas Eve is primarily when it gets told, so I've no doubt that you will hear it at some point. So that brings us to the final sort of point of Santa, which is again an American tradition, and that is the last reindeer, the 9th one, who, as we know, is Rudolph, who is by far the most famous and most recognized reindeer. So Rudolph is originally from a song or a poem titled Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and that was written by Robert L. May in 1933. So the idea behind it was that Rudolph, he couldn't really fit in with the rest of the reindeer in the herd because of his bright nose. They all thought it was a bit weird and shunted him. So Rudolph spent most of his young life in depression until eventually Santa came to see him. It was Santa's belief that Rudolph's nose could be used as a makeshift lantern to help guide him on his journey across the sky to deliver presents. And the main reason why Santa wanted to enlist Rudolph with the reindeer is primarily because 1, it's dark, so it's blooming hard to see anything, and 2, that according to the poem or song, there was an absolutely viciously severe fog, and potentially in some stories it's actually a blizzard, and it was just impossible to see your hand in front of your face. So Santa Claus reckoned that Rudolph's bright nose would be able to, guide the way for them. According to the story, Rudolph instantly agreed to be of service. He was linked up as the navigator with the rest of the sleigh team, and off the 9 reindeer went that year. In some of the stories, Rudolph is actually Blitzen's son. However, this is a more modern adaptation and it's not recorded in the original song or poem. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thus ends the tale of the Big Man in Red. I do hope you enjoyed. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then please remember to like and subscribe for more lore, myths, legends, and stories. I am Shenlong Pendragon. Until next time, remember, knowledge is power. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and to all a good night.